Hi there, welcome to Flogan Dreams. This video is going to be, would I repurchase these? Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. Today we're starting a new eyeshadow palette related series where I ask myself the question, of these 10 eyeshadow palettes that I currently have in my makeup collection, would I repurchase these? And I've seen loads of other creators doing these and I was like, you know what, that's fun. And I think that's another way for me to be talking about some older palettes or things that have been discontinued, but that maybe I still really like, or for whatever reason, these are still in my collection, but if they were released now, would I buy them again? That's sort of the question we're working with. And I hope you're as excited for this series as I am. In case you're unfamiliar with the channel, then hi, my name is Maaike. I live in the Netherlands. I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, and this greatly influences how I feel about makeup and where my preferences lie. I've been reviewing makeup for more than a decade. I love eyeshadow palettes, Esses and Catrice, and getting the use out of my makeup. So if that is something you would be interested in viewing, then definitely consider subscribing. I would love to have you here because we're having loads of fun here together. So yes, today we are talking about 10 eyeshadow palettes that I've randomly selected. I took 5 from the one drawer and 5 from the other. And to just chat, would I still be interested in purchasing these if these came to the market right now? Would I still want to put my makeup budget towards it? And for me, my makeup budget, so to speak, works a little bit differently than for the average consumer, because I tend to use the AdSense I make to try and put it back into the channel. That also goes into buying equipment for the channel, but it also means that I just get to use some of that money as a bit of a makeup budget every month as well. So that's how I try to roll with it, which means that I tend to also sometimes buy things for the channel. But I've decided to not discriminate against whether I've bought something for the channel or whether I've just bought it out of my own personal interest. I'm just going to be randomly selecting 10 palettes every single month. My last count was that I have 314 different palettes in my collection, which means if I do this video every single month and I feature 10 palettes every single time, I could keep this going for more than 2 years. Which is a bit scary, I think, but I'm not sure if everybody's going to be interested for that amount of time. And I actually have this wish, but I think I'll do that next time, to use a number generator and pick them randomly that way, and then tick them off my list. So I'll make sure to put the Excel, like Google sheet that I created for my eyeshadow palette collection video, to put that in the description box down below, and I'll keep score which ones I featured in this video on that sheet. And that way you can also be up to date on what we've already talked about and what we haven't covered yet. And if you then want to make a request, I just have an entire list of all the palettes I have. So if you want me to feature a particular palette in a video like this, all you need to do is ask, because I have it all listed there. First things first, this is the first palette I wanted to feature here today, the Natascha Denona Mini Retro. And we all know how much I love the Natascha Denona eyeshadow palette formula, but in recent years, I've just come to the conclusion that Natascha Denona color stories are not necessarily up my vibe, which means that earlier in the year, I did an entire video dedicated to rearranging my 4 Natascha Denona midi palettes, and I've also taken some shades from my Lila palette and put them in the gold or put them in my singles collection, focusing really on the shades that I like. But with these mini palettes, they're glued in, you can't take them out. So I thought it would be fun to feature a palette like this, so you can see, okay. And I think that of all of the mini palettes I have by Natascha Denona, I have 3, that this is my favorite color story-wise, because this is just right up my street. For some people, this may pull a little bit too peachy if you have a true cool undertone, but mine is more neutral leaning, which means that actually peachy tones can look really nice on me, provided they aren't too orange. If it's a true, like, pinky peach, then it looks really nice on me, and that's what we're getting in here, especially this, like, super high shiny thing. Let me see if I can get it to catch the light a little bit here. You can just see that that's this high shine shimmer. It works a bit like a topper, but it can be layered onto the lid for you to, you know, really wear it at full intensity. You get 2 grayish, green leading shades, a little bit sage-like, and then these 2 are more beigey neutrals, and this is a bit more of a peach. I feel that the shades in here are a little bit more unique to my collection than the shades we got in the larger retro, which is why I wasn't, or retro glam, I should say. I always mix it up because the names are so similar. But the retro glam, I've made part of that reorganization because it was the greens that I truly liked about that palette and some of the cooler tone neutrals. But the rosiness wasn't really up my street, so I put that in a different palette. And I like how this is very light. It can be a full-on green look if you'd like. You can make it very neutral. That toppery shade at the top there is great for adding dimension and making something a little bit more nighttime appropriate. So one thing I've always appreciated about this one, and it's sort of the standard that I hold all of my Natasha Denona palettes to, is that this is just, even though it's only a 5-pan, I can do 4, 5, 6, 7 different looks with this, no matter what I want, because there's just so much going on, even though it's just 5 shades. I mean, what would be a stunning look is like if you were to put this matte all over the eye and then using this green as a liner. That's a look I've never done. That's like the first thing that pops into my head. Like, hey, that's another thing I could do with this. So there's just a lot you can do with just 5 shades, and that's why I think that if this were to be released, I would definitely still be repurchasing it. So Natasha Denona Retro Mini definitely gets a check mark of one that I think I would definitely be repurchasing. Secondly is another palette that I love. This is the e.l.f. Celestial Winter palette. This was a limited edition for winter last year. However, they have come out with 4 palettes in this format in their newer range, and there is a palette in there. I think it's called the Infinity palette, something space related as well, and it looks very similar to this. It just doesn't have any blues. It seems to be a little bit more purple leaning. But that is very similar, but it doesn't have the duochrome that really makes this palette. Yes, this shade here isn't just a periwinkle purple leaning shade, it's a blue to purple duochrome. It's really, really stunning, and this palette blew me away. I decided to try some more e.l.f. products again because they are so incredibly hyped up, and I hadn't truly tried much e.l.f. in recent years because I just felt always a little bit underwhelmed by a lot of the things that I've tried from the brand in the past. But I was like, they've been so hyped up. You know what? I'm gonna do a full face of e.l.f. and I threw this in my basket. I hadn't heard anybody talking about this. The only place I could find any sort of information about this palette and people having used it was some very random Reddit thread, and nobody in the beauty industry, like in the beauty community, had even reviewed this or featured it on their channels. It hadn't come up in any new makeup releases that I had seen. So I was like, is this something we're sleeping on, or is it just not that good? People have been sleeping on e.l.f. I think everybody was very much taken up by the like Charlotte Tilbury dupes that the brand has been doing, but the brand truly shines for me in things that they come up with themselves. And this Celestial Winter palette, save for this one very random warm tone, is just stunning. It's blue, greens, purples, and the purpliness, blueness leans more periwinkle rather than like a true blue, but you do get this, and you get this kind of payoff. What you see in the pan is what you'll see on your eyes. These aren't ashy or chalky, even though they are lighter, more pastel leaning shades. You get some really stunning shimmers in here. I just wish this one matte was like, if we got a lighter version of this instead of this, it would have been perfection. But yeah, I would snatch this up again in a heartbeat, and I'm so sad that so many people missed out upon it because I ordered it in like their Christmas sale, and by the time I was able to film my video, because it took a few weeks to get here with customs and handling fees and all that, so I wasn't able to do the video until February, and by then it had already sold out. So I'm very happy to have this, and I definitely think that I would repurchase the e.l.f. Celestial Winter for sure. A palette I'm not so sure about is this one from Tarte. My Tartelette in Bloom is one that I hold very near and dear to my heart, and I've been buying some of the other later releases that we got in the Tartelette line. I've never tried the original Tartelette. Is that still around? I really need to check whenever I see Tarte again in the store. But yeah, the Juicy palette was one that was very intriguing to me, and I knew I wanted to try it because I love the quality of Tarte and the Tartelette palettes so much. It's hands down one of my favorite eyeshadow formulas. And I tried the Energy palette this summer, and there I just confirmed for myself, like, as much as I like Tarte's formula, their color stories aren't necessarily it. And I had already realized it with this palette, really. Because I feel that this is one of those palettes that, unless you start using it, you won't really know what it's gonna do for you. And that's because the undertones here work differently than in some of the other Tarte palettes I've tried. So in the In Bloom, it's very clear. You get a cool, a neutral, and a warm toned row. And I was hoping that this would do the same thing, that this would be like the more neutral one, and this was the warm one, and this would be more of like a neutral or a cooler tone leaning thing as well. Unfortunately, it's not. Everything in here has quite a bit of warmth, save for the bottom row. The bottom row is the only thing that truly pulled more neutral on me. The pinks had so much peach in them to the point where it started to look a little too orange for me. And if a pink has that sort of orangey peach leaning level to it, it can really give me like the look of pink eye. So I wasn't a huge fan of the pinks, but I got away with them. Like if I mixed and matched it with some of the neutrals, it worked just fine. But wearing it by itself was where I went wrong when I first tested these out. And then this middle row, it looked as if it was only this bronze shimmer that was going to be overly warm toned. But on my skin tone, these didn't pull neutral at all. They were very, very warm. This in the pan, and it could be that it has a pink background, but it looks like it's going to be like a dusty rose, like warm dusty rose leading shade. But it pulled orange on me. It looked very, very orange heavy. And in the viewfinder, it does that too. But if I look at it in real life, it seems to be like a deeper version of this matte. But it didn't play out that way on my eyes, unfortunately. So for me, I kind of regret purchasing this. And I think I like the Energy palette that came after this a little bit better. Now, am I glad that I have this? Yes, because I feel if I want a little bit more oomph out of my In Bloom, I can pull this in, and I also have the Tartelette Toasted, which is incredibly spicy and warm toned. So if I want to tone that out and bring some of those pinks into that one, I definitely can. So I definitely see this having a function in my eyeshadow palette collection. But if I have to be very honest, would I ever put my money towards this one again? The answer would be no. I don't think that I would spend my money on this, and I definitely got it more so to complete the Tartelette collection that I already have. This is more of like a YouTube purchase rather than one where I was like, I'm going to get a lot of wear out of this palette in the future. So I definitely have my reasons for purchasing it, but right now I'm like, knowing what I know now that I've used it, I'm like, this wasn't the best purchase, so would not repurchase. And then this one, I wanted to make sure I featured like different price points in today's video as well. And this is the Baroque from Colourpop. I believe they've discontinued it and you can no longer get it. And this was part of this fall collection, and it has a stunning packaging. That's definitely one of the reasons why I wanted to own this. And then inside, you get one of the prettiest grungy blue color stories you'll ever find on the planet. So is this unique? Yes. Is it something that I needed in my life? Maybe not. I love a good grungy tone for sure, especially in like the season we're heading into, like fall, winter. I love a good grungy thing. But at the end of the day, the only reason why this still lives in my makeup collection rent-free is because it is so different from other things that I have, but I don't necessarily use it a whole lot. And the reason why I don't get a lot of use out of it is because it is just a little bit deep. And once I start using this, as lovely and stunning and different all these shades look in the pan, it doesn't necessarily translate to my lids. I've got quite hooded, deep set eyes, which means that my lids, just by putting a shadow on, already create shadows themselves. So really, I could just wear a one and done shadow every single day and I would be good. I definitely don't need anything super dark, because anything that's dark is already a contrast with my super fair skin tone. And then I also have quite a lot of shadow from my deep set eyes that already creates a natural shadow. So if I put another deeper shade there, it looks even deeper than it was already in the first place. And this is essentially 7 shades of darkness and 2 shades that would work a little bit better on my skin tone. Now, of course, I can use, for instance, this light shade to blend out some of these other things and tone it down a little, and that's definitely how I use it when I do, and it's got a couple of really stunning things. But one of the things I also didn't enjoy about this is that in these 3 shades, it looks really shimmery and dimensional if you look at them in the pan, but the shimmer doesn't really translate to the eyes. So as gorgeous as this is, as unique as it looks, I think I have other grungy palettes in my makeup collection that I get so much more use out of that this one wasn't quite necessary. So I would not repurchase the Colourpop Baroque if I had to purchase it again with like today. Another smaller palette, the Nabla Cutie, and this is the midnight version. I still have all of my Cutie palettes, but I definitely have only kept a few of them in my active makeup collection, and the color stories that weren't quite right are sort of living in a makeup memory box, like for YouTube purchases kind of place. And this Cutie palette in Midnight is one that got to stay. This is one that I've kept in my everyday makeup collection because there's something just about the look of this that just really appeals to me, especially this teal shimmer. I love this navy blue shimmer is really nice, or more like an electric blue, I should say. The dark navy in here is stunning. This baby blue is stunning, and the white has a blue flip and is a bit more of a duochrome. The only thing I didn't understand with these Cutie palettes is that they put random warm tones in. Like if this was like a taupe shimmer, I would have praised this into the high heavens. But in terms of repurchasing this now, I feel that currently in my makeup collection, I have found blue eyeshadow that I like better. I have the blue palette from Glam Shop, which was around the same price, I think, as I paid for this, because these were around like the 17 to 20, maybe 25 euro mark, if I'm not mistaken. And the Glam Shop palettes, their 9 pans, are also roughly around 20 euros. And I have the blue tone that they used to do. And those are some of my favorite blues, and I can do any blue tone look on the planet together with that and my BH Cosmetics Sweet Shop in the bubblegum shade. That also has a really stunning teal shade. So would this be very necessary right now? I think when I bought this, I didn't have that many good blue dedicated palettes. I think the only thing I had was the Colourpop Blue Moon, and that one I took apart and I only kept a couple of shades because I didn't love the quality and I felt none of the undertones were similar enough that it would go. So for a while, this was the best blue tone palette I had. I still very much appreciate it for what it does when I do use it, so I do really enjoy this, but I think I have other blue tone palettes that I just prefer better, which is why in today's market, if I were to be in the market for a blue tone palette, which I'm not because I have my perfect one, I would not repurchase this. So if I were to lose this or whatever, I would not try and hunt it down. If it came out today, it would not go onto a makeup wish list. Because I have a really good blue tone palette already. I also wanted to put in some things that might have been very difficult to get your hands on, and I think a notorious one is the Club Nebula, the Kaleidos makeup collab with Angelica Nugvist. Now, I just did an entire Q&A on Friday where I talked about not really buying a lot of influencer collabs and that I don't really get it, but this, I think this is hands down the best collab anyone has ever done. Because this color story is just everything. Like these are my shades. You get some grungy things, but it goes from light to dark, so you can do something very neutral. It's got color, but you get the neutrals you need to do a very, to tone things down and to make it more wearable for yourself. I mean, you don't have to put that acid green limey shade all over your lid for sure if you don't want to, but all of the shades go together really perfectly. I love these grungy purples that we get in here. That's like the best part in the palette for me. I think it's called Rock Hopper. Yeah, Rock Hopper. This like grayish plum is one of the best shades in my entire makeup collection. So this, in terms of a collab that I wouldn't have missed out on, is definitely one. Even if it didn't have the Angelica Nugvist collab attached to it, this would be a palette I would be interested in, and definitely for sure, if this were to be released right now, if it was announced this fall, we're coming out with a fall themed makeup palette and it was this, I would have snatched it up in a heartbeat. I would have set my alarm clock to buy it straight away. So if you ever see a brand doing anything like this, I would definitely say check it out because I think this is one of the best color stories ever created. Of course, I need to include some favorites, or palettes that I've always told you are some of my favorites. And I think by now, though, the Rose Quartz by Huda Beauty has my preference over the Mercury Retrograde, but this still lives in my head rent-free as one of the best palettes ever made. You don't get any of the weird putty shades that, you know, Huda Beauty sometimes puts into palettes. Everything is just a standard shadow, and I've always appreciated that. Yes, it's got a bit of warmth, but it also has some lighter shade. It has some brighter pops of color. It's got some rosy things, and I've always loved using these 6 shades together, these 6 shades together, and these 6 shades together for creating looks. But this palette also just spells it out and does it for you because you can use it as quads, like this, like this. Like, everything just goes together seamlessly, and you can really mix and match and create looks that way. That's one of the things that has always been very fun, and I always appreciated when brands do this, where once you start using, you realize that you can take 2 shades that are together, or 3 shades that are together in the palette, or 4 shades that are together in the palette. And every single time you do that, the look just comes together. And this is one of those palettes. However, I feel that that is something that I never truly capture until I've used every single shade in a palette. Which is why that is always my aim when I ever review a new palette, is to make sure I use every single shade at least once, even if it's just as a liner or a blend shade, just to see what it does on my skin and to see how well all the undertones come together. And with this, I feel that that's like foolproof every single time, which is why I greatly appreciate it till this day in my makeup collection. However, did I really need this in my makeup collection? And the answer would be no. I think looking at this color story nowadays, I don't think I would be likely to purchase something like this, mainly because I would very much like be thrown off by some of these warm tones over here. I'm never a fan of something this like light yellowish that we get in here. We get another peach here. So by now, I'm just not a huge fan of having an overly warm color story, or a color story that's roughly 50% warm tones with some cool tones thrown in. And this is actually not even that cool tone because you get quite a lot of rosiness over on this side. Like, it's more like warm tones with like a hint of something more cool toned, and then a bunch of rosy tones and colorful shades. That's what this does. And I'm just not currently in my colorful era. And again, I have color stories, especially these rosy tones from K-beauty brands that I feel do something very similar that this palette does. And if I want to do like a pop of teal with something, or like a pop of mint, I have many other options that I can use for that. So this was definitely not necessary to have it in my makeup collection. And that's why I don't think I would be repurchasing this, even though I greatly appreciate this palette till this day. Of course, we also need to feature some palettes that, again, I hold very near and dear to my heart, but that you can no longer buy. I'm, of course, talking about all of my Zoeva palettes. I love every single Zoeva palette I still have in my collection, and the Blanc Fusion has to be one of my favorites they've ever done. And I'm just going to spoil it straight away. If this were to be released nowadays, it would get a total yes. Because this is the yellow toned color story for people who don't love warm tones. Because even though it's yellow, the entire bottom row is like light neutrals with a cool leaning undertone. Like, this is a cool tone, this blend shade is a cool tone, it's got a little bit of pink running through it, same for this creamy shade. The only thing that has a little bit of warmth in terms of like the mattes here at the bottom is this one. A whole row of mattes, this is an entire row of shimmers, and again, the only thing that's truly like super warm is this caramel like goldeny shade here. But we get this taupey purple thing, really stunning. This yellow is an intense yellow, but it's like, If you've ever tried the Naked Honey and that leans very mustard for you, this pulls more like a vibrant yellow, but not in like a weird way. This I've always appreciated because it's that soft yellowy tone gold that just works. And here again, we get a white, but it's got a gold flip, so it's a duochrome. But all of these mattes and all of these shimmers go together beautifully. The only two shades I'm not really drawn towards are these two, but everything else in here is just stunning. And I wish they had not continued it because it just does so much in a 10 pan palette that I've always greatly appreciated. So yes, this gets a thumbs up. I would definitely purchase this again. If this were released right now, if Zoeva was like, okay, we've done this whole rebrand, but we're bringing back some of our original color stories and they bring this one back, it would go onto the wish list. Of course, I already have this, but provided I no longer have this or whatever, then yes, I would definitely buy this. This is still, till this day, one of the most unique things in my makeup collection, and it works so well. This definitely needs to go on to like the next palettes I need to go back to list because this is stunning. Another palette I've always labeled as one of my favorites, the Lorac Pro 3. And this was the neutral palette that made me realize why I didn't love some of the neutral palettes that were very much raved about in the online beauty community by a lot of beauty gurus. I'm talking about Urban Decay Naked, the original Too Faced Chocolate Bar. These were all color stories, and also like the original Lorac Pro palette, which I've since decluttered. As beautiful as those palettes were, this palette made me realize what I had been missing. And so many people said that this was a bad palette when it came out. This is not a bad palette. This is a bad palette if you have anything deeper than a light skin tone. This is made for fair people, which is why I've always appreciated. It doesn't go super deep, but you get some shades that you could use as liners if you'd like to. Some people didn't like some of the shimmer shades down here, but I've always intensified shimmers with my fingers, and it works a miracle every time. But this was released around that 2016 moment when full glam became the only thing that was acceptable to be wearing in terms of like YouTube. And I think that that's why this palette was just burned to the ground by some people. It's like, it's not pigmented, it's not this, it looks ashy, it's chalky, it's not. This formula is consistent with the other Lorac palettes I've tried. I've tried 4 of them, decluttered the first 2. I still have 3 and 4 till this day, and I still really enjoy the formula. However, my Lorac palettes have gone a little bit forgotten in my makeup collection. And the reason why this is by now a little bit forgotten in my makeup collection is because I own Natasha Denona. And I think that the Natasha Denona formula is superior to this, but something, for instance, that I Need a Nude that's new, I'm looking at this now and I'm like, that's I Need a Nude in a nutshell, but less peachy. Because in terms of warmth, you only really get this terracotta shade and it's more yellow leaning than anything else. Nothing has like that weird peachy rosy tone that the I Need a Nude has. I'm now looking at this, I've just pulled it out of a drawer and I'm like, I don't think I need a nude because I've got this guy. That's now living in my brain rent-free. But yeah, the cool tone shimmers that you get towards the bottom. You get a pop of purple, but it's not overly done. I've always loved clay. It's like a rosy brown, really stunning. You get a cool tone taupe. That's another great medium tone here. Then you get pink nude, which is great for blending things out and toning things down. And the 2 dark browns are cool tone leaning as well. So I've always loved this palette for what it does for me, but formula-wise, I just feel we've moved on within the makeup sphere from a color story like this, you could say. So I really enjoy this. I'm glad I still have it. This is one that if I ever decide to declutter it, it's going to have the same fate as some of my Urban Decay palettes. This is going to go into a makeup memory box because this was a game changer for me. When I used this, it was like, oh, everything I've used has always just been too dark and too warm toned, and it didn't go with my undertone and my skin tone the way this did. And I felt that whenever I used this, every look looked pretty on me. It felt great. It blended itself. And I was like, this is the kind of eyeshadow that I want to use. And even though everybody and their mother was just hating on this palette, I'm so glad that I stuck to my guns and that I went against the grain and found this in my life, because in a way, this is the kind of color story that is playing in the back of my head whenever I look at color stories before I purchase them. Like, is it going to be light enough? Are there too many deep shades? New Anastasia palette. What's up with that? Are there too many like other things going on that I feel maybe too warm toned? The Natasha Denona I Need a Nude. And I now look at this and I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't need the I Need a Nude because I have this. And again, maybe this should just go into Palettes Revisited for October, and we'll see, and we'll have a play and we can have a look at how similar it actually is. So yeah, I definitely think I already have something like it and it was just incredibly overlooked. But I do think you can still buy this. Because I think the entire Lorac range, you can still buy all of their palettes. Like this standard size, you can. And then finally, the final palette I wanted to talk to you about is the Sigma New Mod. And the Sigma New Mod is one of those palettes that I was definitely very much from the start. It was announced. I was like, yep, I need that in my life. But Sigma Beauty can be a little bit hard to find in terms of makeup products when you're in the EU. Their brushes are all around, but the makeup is a little harder to find. But I got my hands on it just fine. And this is, again, a color story that kind of throws you off because of the gold packaging. This pulled so much darker against my skin tone than I had expected. So if I look at like a deeper mauve rosy palette, the palette that instantly hits my brain is the Melt Cheese and Parties. Till this day, Melt Cheese and Parties, thank you Melt for turning into a palette and including some lighter shades, because now it actually works better for me. I used to own the stack, found it very, very dark, but when they changed it into an 8-pan, they put in some lighter shades and now it works a lot better for me. And I was hoping that this would be like that, but from already this, it's like, for me, these are not even like mid-tones. Like it's very glam, very intense. And as much as I like it, this, like the Huda Beauty, comes together in like quads. Like this is a quad, 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 this is a quad. This is a quad, but you can also like mix and match across the palette, of course. I really, really appreciate this color story. This is what I love wearing. Again, nothing here that is overly warm, save for this gold towards the end. But I just wish that the saturation in these shades had been turned down just one notch. And then it would have worked a lot better for me. Knowing what I know now, I would definitely stick to my Melt Cheese and Parties, and I don't think I would repurchase this one either, because it's just a little bit deep. And again, it's something I found out through using it. I think that especially if palettes are put in this like very high shine metallic packaging, like you can just see that the colors look differently. Like if like this and the palette doesn't hit the light, it looks very, very dark. But then when I turn it and the light actually hits it and the gold undertone, it's just, I think that really skews what this looked like. And I wish that brands would just always put it in a more neutral background so we can really tell the colors. But yeah, when it comes to looking at swatches online, that's also not always very helpful. And I think I got this upon release. So yeah, I got it very, very soon. Sometimes I just take that decision and then I'm sometimes stuck with something. Is this a good palette? For sure. But knowing what I know now, I would not repurchase this one. So that's it. That's what I wanted to chat to you about in today's video. Thank you so very much for joining me. Let me know in a comment down below if you own any of these, if you would be inclined to repurchase them. Maybe you've hit pan on these already. Who knows? But yeah, I just thought that this could be a good hypothetical kind of question to ask myself. Would I repurchase these, yes or no? And as you can tell, I think it was like a 50-50 split. I didn't keep count on this at all. So yeah, thank you so very much for joining me today. Thumbs up the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make several videos every single week, so I'd like to come back for more, and then I hope to see you in my next video. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.